How you doing out there? Leroy St. Germain. I publish your ward news. We have a group of about a dozen newspapers here in the Toronto area. We're sort of the eye on City Hall. And our guest tonight is Tony Chipman, SD. You'll never guess what the SD stands for. Shit disturber. Matter of fact, Tony's got a page on Facebook. It's for cranky old men that are shit disturbers. So if you're in the Toronto area, dig Tony Chipman. That's Tony, T-O-N-Y. Chipman, C-H-I-P-M-A-N. On Facebook, Toronto, you'll find him. He'll be happy to get you involved with his club of over 70 ass kickers. And I'm sure you'll be able to vent some anger there and have some fun. In any event, Tony's got some important stuff to drop on you tonight, so I'm going to leave and let Tony take over.
And I thank you, Leroy. I wonder how many people know that Leroy has a cousin who is a very dear friend of mine in Winnipeg. I call him Canada's greatest entertainer, and that is Ray St. Germain. Ray used to come on my show. He had his own television program of country music, and he would bring his stars over from the show, and I would interview them on my program on CKY in Winnipeg. And Ray and I became great friends. He's a wonderful guy, and Leroy is the same. So I'm happy that Leroy is sponsoring this, and the people that surround Leroy are wonderful. They are a wonderful group of people who care about this country and about the future. And that is what our program is going to be all about, and I have guests planned to come in and talk about it. But tonight, I wanted to take the time off to just sort of tell you about me and about my life and some of the funny things and why I am standing up and protesting, having the courage to stand up and protest against the things that I'm protesting. And it's funny, as I'm at 75, I'm reflecting back on my life, and I'm looking over all the things in my life that happened, and I'm thinking, I remember them telling me the story when I was a kid. When I was born in 1939, that was when the war started, they took me home to our new house that was being built on Williams Lake Road, and that's the road that between Purcell's Cove Road and Herring Cove Road outside of Halifax, and it sort of goes between those two highways, and they brought me home to this house. It wasn't quite finished yet. The people that were building it were the Salon Whites, and they were our next door neighbors, and they liked to have a drink once in a while, and they loved my dad because my dad worked at the Liquor Commission. And back then, now this is back in the 30s, in the Liquor Commission, Dad used to tell us that they had to take the kegs, they would get the kegs of liquor in, and what the workers would do is they would drain the kegs until they got the number of bottles out of them that it was supposed to come out of it, and then they would supposedly throw the keg out. But what they would do was add some water to the keg, swish it around, and get themselves a few bottles of booze out of it. And that's how my dad paid for the building of our house on Williams Lake Road, by keeping these guys sort of on the edge of drunkenness all the time, which brought funny stories. Like my mom was getting ready to do the laundry and took all of our socks that those days you wore them until they were hard, it was dirt, and she softened them up by putting them in a pot on the stove and boiling them to get the dirt out of them. And Dad sat down with the Salon Whites, and they were all drinking, and when they got hungry, Dad got up and grabbed scooper and scooped some of this stuff out of the pot on the stove and put it into bowls, not knowing that it was socks that were in there, and that's what they had for dinner, whereas it was a bowl of this dirty sock water. So that was just one of the funny stories that came out of it. But when they brought me home, they put me in this room that wasn't quite finished. They were getting the nursery ready, and they had to paint the nursery and put some things up in the nursery for me. So they put me in this bedroom that wasn't quite finished, and I was there for about a week. And when they took me up and put me into my nursery, I started to cry and scream like crazy. And they said they didn't know what to do. They tried everything to calm me down, to stop me from crying. Finally, they took me back into the room that wasn't finished. There was no walls, or just the framework, and no ceiling, just the framework. And as soon as they took me back to the room, I stopped crying and fell asleep. So that was my first experience at shit disturbing. Okay, so that's how far back it goes for me. This is not something new that I'm just starting out. So as I grew up on Williams Lake Road, it was a great experience. I met my two dearest friends, and I still say this to this day, Ernie and Normie Blois, who lived next door. Normie was a year younger, Ernie was a year older, and we from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, we were with each other. And this was for years. I mean, we were like brothers that loved each other. And I miss them so much, and I still think of them to this day. We built teepees and cabins, and you know, kids today try crazy things. We tried the craziest things you'd ever think of. It's a wonder we're still alive today. So that was just part of my early days, and that was on Williams Lake Road. I started school at Jollymore School, and the one thing I remember about that is the first day in school, I shit myself. I didn't know how to hold my hand up and ask permission to leave, and I ended up, but fortunately at the time I was just a kid, and as soon as I got outside, I pulled my leg up and dropped it out of my pants. So that was my first experience with school. As for standing up for people, I remember the next time, after Jollymore School, I went to another school, and it was up the Purcell's Cove Road, and I went there with Ernie and Normie, and there was this guy that went to school, was a fat dude, and he was big and fat, and he used to pick on my buddies, Ernie and Normie, and he was a bully. So one day I said to Ernie and Normie, I said, look, after school, I'm going to leave first, and then you guys give me 5 minutes, and then you follow and say something to this fat guy and piss him off. So that's what they did. And then I said, when you run down, you know the path we go through to get home. You get them to chase you down that path. So that's what they did. And what was going on was I was behind a big rock on this path waiting for them. And as they went by, I had this big stick in my hand. When Fatso came by, whoop, I let him go, and down he went. And away I went. So the next morning I head into the school, and there he is standing at the on the steps of the school, and I thought, oh God, here I go now. He's going to kick the shit out of me. But instead, as soon as he saw me, he took off. So for all of you being bullied, the secret is to stand up, because bullies are really the biggest cowards there are on earth. And I would love to see us change the definition of bully to coward. Instead of calling them bullies, let's call them what they are, cowards. As they were back then, that was back in the 40s. It hasn't changed. They're still bullies and cowards. So that was, I've been thinking of that for some time. Now, getting back to my story, I really want you to understand where I'm coming from when I have this desire to stand up and fight for my rights. And as we go through, there's all kinds of, and not to be afraid to experience something new. That's another thing I've tried to get across to young people. You don't live your life, experience whatever you can experience. If you see something you'd like to try it. If it's not, if there's no way it's going to hurt you or kill you, try it. So you will learn from that experience what's good, what's bad. You will take a lesson away from everything you try doing. And that's what I've done. And that's why I've been so successful in life. Let's go back to school. Now, the next school I went to was Armdale High. And I was in grade 9, and I was voted the entertainment director for grade 9. And the entertainment, we used to have a Thursday afternoon class or auditorium where all the school came together in the auditorium, and each week one different class had to put on the entertainment. So when it came time for us to put on the entertainment, I was the entertainment director, and I came up with this crazy idea: we'll have a fake wrestling match. Well, it was so stupid, I couldn't go through with it. So the day of this happening, on my bike and headed home. It was about 4 miles. Ran into the house, grabbed a bunch of Reader's Digest from my grandmother, and she said, where are you going with those? I got to go, Grandma, bye. And I headed out back to school, on the way reading the jokes in the Reader's Digest. And when I got back to school, we had the wrestling match on stage, and everybody started going, oh, shit, what crap. And I knew this, so when it was over, I came out and I did a stand-up comedy routine telling jokes out of a Reader's Digest. And I remember the one that they liked the most. I told the story of the drunks that came out of the bar, and of course I'm just a kid up there on stage, and I stagger out, and he bumps into the lamppost, and he falls back, and he staggers forward again and bumps into the lamppost again, staggers back. The third time he staggers back, and he says, lost in an impenetrable forest. And of course that brought a great laugh from all of the school. The principal stood up and said, I wish you put as much effort into your schoolwork as you do your comedy, Mr. Chipman. And the director of the theater group said, why haven't you joined the theater group yet? So that was my experience there. As life went on, I went to work. I used to skip school a lot. And when I skipped school, we used to run down the back. The Dingle was the most famous beach in Halifax. It was a beautiful beach. And we would jump out the second-story window of the school, Armdale High, and then run back down through this lady's yard, and she would come out and wave her cane, get out of my yard. And I found out later that I went to work for this lady. She was the first female broadcaster in Canada, Anna Dexter. And Anna had her own show, and she used to talk about the things that people were doing, where the best place to shop was, and stuff like that. And my mom was in the hospital. I went in to visit her, and I'd quit school. I threatened to punch out a teacher, so I sort of quit before they fired me out. And my mom said, have you got a job yet? And I said, no. And she said, well, you know, Anna Dexter has been on the radio talking about needing a gardener to help her out. Why don't you check her out? So I said, okay. And I ended up, my first job was with Anna Dexter, the first female broadcaster in Canada. Now that's something to look back on, isn't it? And that wasn't the first of things. I also lived at 59 Hollis Street in Halifax, right next door to the most famous whorehouse in Canada. And I often wondered as a kid growing up why the alleyway next to our home, next to 59 Hollis was always full of used condoms and bottles of liquor, or used liquor bottles. But anyway, and it's now being inhabited by one of Canada's famous stars. So I'm getting a little choked up here talking about my past. So I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to just take a short break and walk around and calm down and get back. I've got so many stories to tell you. Don't go away, please. I'll be right back. Hi, welcome back. I had to take a little break there. My throat was getting sore from talking. And you wouldn't believe it that I get tired talking. Not likely. Anyway, tonight is dedicated to letting you know about my life and why I'm doing this crazy thing of taking on the police, the government, and all these huge organizations. And the reason is I'm a soldier, and I have been since I was 5 years old, and I'm proud of it. It's the proudest thing I have ever done in my life. And I remember when I was going to Morris Street School in Halifax, and I failed grade 2, and my teacher there was Miss Colley, and she took me aside and she started teaching me privately, and I graduated the second year of grade 2. But it was just, this is the kind of guy I was. And life was always this amazing experience for me. And when I heard that there was this Army Cadet Corps at Goresbrook School, which was twice as far away from home as Morris Street for me, I had to go there. So I went to the principal, asked him to transfer me to Goresbrook School where I could join the Army Cadet Corps. And to this day, I remember putting that uniform on for the first time. And anybody who has served in our Canadian forces will tell you the same thing. The feeling when you put that on is a feeling that you never, ever lose. You may take the uniform off, but that feeling is there. And it went on. I was 12 years old the first time I donned the uniform of the armed forces. I was 15 when I joined the Army militia, the Ordnance Corps in Halifax. My uncle was the RSM and pulled a few strings and got me in. At 17, I was in the regular Army, and at 18 and 4 months, I got permission from my mom, and I was on my way to Germany for my first tour overseas with the armed forces, warned before we went over that if the Russians acted up, that our life expectancy would be 48 hours because we were the front line troops, and before they could get replacements in, it would take 48 hours. So it was pretty short. And at the time, it's now I'm looking back and I'm seeing on television, everybody was so afraid at that point in time in life, crawling under beds and hiding and worried about nuclear war. And we sort of, the only time I ever saw us really get excited was the day Kennedy got killed. And I know I was lying and reading a Harold Robbins book on my bunk, and I came across that the President of the United States has been shot. And I looked out the window, and we had an American missile unit that was posted with our artillery unit, and they were prepared to release a nuclear bomb if necessary. And I looked out the window, and the Americans were getting all their battle dress on and getting all dressed up, ready to go to war. And I said to a buddy of mine, I said, well, we got to get the hell out of here. Let's go over to the canteen and get drunk, because if we don't, we might never get a chance after today. So we figured it was going to be wartime. We were going to be killed. We might as well go out and party, get drunk. But as it happened, nothing occurred. And as you know, we're still here, no nuclear war. And I never ever thought of myself as an Army vet, because I was never really in a war. But when I look back now and I see how afraid people were in this country and in the U.S. about a nuclear war, I realize now that I was in a war and prepared to die for our rights and freedoms in this country. And that has never left me. I've always strived to make sure that we remain a democracy and that we keep our rights and freedoms. But what I'm finding is that nobody knows our rights and freedoms. We should have them in school. We should have our schools teaching our rights and freedoms. We should have the government, instead of wasting money on drug enforcement laws, let's put the money into something useful. Let's put them into supplying every child in school with a copy of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and let them study it. Let them learn what their rights are. Let them learn what their freedoms are. Let them know what they have to fight for. And if we do that, we'll start having a better country. We need to get our democracy back. And the only people that can do it are the young people. So that's why I love the youth. Later on, we'll talk about when I first got to Toronto and how I was surrounded by a group of teenagers when I quit drinking that inspired me to change my life and to go back to what I was when I was a teenager and the things that I believed in then instead of what I believed in when I got here, which was basically believing in stuff that wasn't real. So that was all part of my growing up, and it was exciting and fun, and my Army career was amazing. My schooling was amazing. The friends I met in the military, I'll never forget them. They are my brothers, my comrades in arms, and I hope that any of you who are watching this will see the need for all of us to stand up. We fought, we were willing to die for this country, and now we're watching. And when we came back to this country, we turned things over to the police to carry on protecting our rights and freedoms. But they are the ones that are violating it so bad, and we have to do something about it. So I'm hoping with these broadcasts that we can unite all of the over 70s kick-ass club and get us all united into one and get fighting for our rights and freedoms. That's what this program is all about. I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to have to take a quick break and come back to you in just a few minutes, but I have to have a quick break, okay? So don't go away. I'll be right back.
Marking the spot, giving way to the tender glow of the moon that lets you know you're not.
And I'm back and getting my voice back again. I've got so many things that I want to tell you about. I hope that I can get them all in before it's over. Talking about the Army beforehand, I want to go back to some of my school activities prior to joining the Army. And some of the things I really believe that don't go through life believing what other people tell you to believe. Find out as much for yourself as you can and experience as much as you can of your own. And then from that, grab out what is helpful to you and throw away what you found is useless to you, okay? And that's what I've done. And it's caused me to have this wonderful life of so many things happening to me. I remember I went to a friend of mine, Larry. Larry was about 6'6", and he was 16, and I was 16. And we went to visit my brother in Truro. And back then, they used to have a movie, and then in between the movies, they would have live entertainment. So Larry and I went to this show, and it was a country show, and the guy came out and sang, and then he brought out his two daughters, and they were beautiful young ladies, and they performed, and then he came back out again, and Larry and I were both half pissed, and we're sitting in the front row and bring on the broads, bring on the broads, and the guy, the father come out and he said, well, he said, I see we got some people out there in the audience that don't believe in listening to me and rather have a girl singing. Maybe you'd like to come up and sing yourself, sir, would you? And I said to Larry, he said, let's go. He said, okay, so up we go on stage. And fella says, so what y'all gonna sing for, son? And Larry said, what are we gonna do? I said, I don't know, Blue Suede Shoes. So the two of us started singing Blue Suede Shoes on the stage at this theater in Truro, Nova Scotia. And then we finished the song, and the guys, thank you very much, boys. Now you go sit down. And we went back and sat down, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, flashlight in the face, and we look up, and there's a police officer there. And he says, come on, you two, out. So he marched us out, and I said, what's going on here, officer? He said, well, we were told that you were causing a problem. I said, no, we weren't causing a problem. I said, the guy asked if there was anybody in the audience that wanted to come up and sing, and we went up and sang. Well, he said, look, just to avoid any problems, why don't you just leave? So we left, and we found out later that there was a big problem at the theater because the kids were so upset with us being thrown out that they rioted and they smashed windows and tore the seats up in the theater, and it went crazy. So that was one of my crazy experiences as a kid. And that's just a slight example. To talk a little bit more about the Army, though, there were days that I'm telling you, there were things that happened in the Army you wouldn't believe, and that's why soldiers today don't talk much about their Army career, because a lot of the stuff they would have to talk about would be, you would be sitting there saying, you didn't really do that. Oh my God, oh. So, because we do really strange things. I remember in Germany, one time we were headed off to my favorite city of all time, Copenhagen, Denmark. And as a matter of fact, to this day, I tell people when I die, I want to be cremated and my remains sprinkled over Copenhagen, Denmark, the most beautiful city in the whole world, not to mention the most beautiful women in the whole world. And to them, sleeping together is like dining together. So it's a beautiful country, and I'd love to be back there forever, okay? But, and I was not part of this crew, but I was on the ship, the ferry going across from Germany to Denmark when Cal Huyton and a couple of others, Cal's now dead, decided that they would take over the ferry, and they did. They went up to the room where they're piloting the ferry, and they took it over and announced, we are taking over the ship. And when we got to the Denmark side, of course, they were arrested, and many stories about the men being in jail, and, you know, help, 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 I can't help you, I'm in here too. So we do crazy things. Soldiers do crazy things. We don't do the crazy things that civilians do. We have our own crazy things to do. And I'm sure that there are many things that I could tell you about. But, you know, one of my, and that was one of my proudest, the things that happened, and hopefully I'll be able to get through the times and tell you more and more about my days in the Army. And one of the things that happened to me while I was in the Army was one day I finished a signals course, a signaler's course, came third, as I did on most of my courses. I came second or third. And when I got back to camp, there was a call for signalers to go to this engineering camp in Virl, and I was stationed in Hamer. So I thought, yeah, I'll go. Anything to get out of camp, get somewhere else. So we ended up in this building, and we're sitting in this room, and about 10 of us, and in walks a wonderful friend of mine from the, what was the organization? Roger McLaughlin, who was with the Queen's Own Rifles, and him and I had been on a junior NCO course back in the, back around 58, I guess it would have been, that him and I were on a junior NCO course together and became great friends. We were down in Holland. We went to a town in Holland, and we were partying like crazy, and Sunday evening rolled around, and I said to him, I said, we're not going to get back to camp on time, so come with me to the police station. So we went down to the police station and walked in, and I said, we are two soldiers. We're on course at Fort Chambly, and if you get a call, would you please tell them that we reported to you before midnight? And they said, okay. So we got back to camp. We were both charged with being AWOL. That's absent without leave. And we went before the commanding officer of the course, and he sent us both back to our units. So they marched us out, and I turned around and I said, Sergeant Major. He said, yes, Chipman. I said, I wish a redress of grievance, and that is like an appeal in the Army, is a redress of grievance. So he said, on what grounds? I said, well, I would like to tell the major that. So they marched me back in, and the commanding officer said, and what's your redress of grievance about, Mr. Chipman, or Corporal Chipman? I said, we are on a junior NCO course. When we qualify, we are going to go back to camp, and we are going to have to teach younger men the laws, the rules, the regulations of the Canadian Army that are taught to us here. Now you have taught us that if you are in a situation where you cannot get back to camp in time to go to the nearest military base, or if there are no military bases, go to the nearest police station. Now, I said, we went to the nearest police station, we reported, we told you you could call and check it, but obviously that is not a law. If that's not a law if we don't follow it. And how can I go back as a corporal and tell privates the law is that if you go to a police station, you won't be charged with being AWOL, when it's crazy. So I got away with it. We got back onto the course again. We passed the course, and everything was fine. Give you this as an example of standing up for your rights and not being afraid to say what you have to say. And that was a good example because, it was taking on the Army, and it wasn't the first time or the last time I took on the Army. When my grandmother died, I was visiting my brother in Winnipeg. I was stationed in Winnipeg with him, with the RCHA, and my grandmother passed, and I was at his house when he got the word, and I went back to camp, and I walked in, and I walked and asked for the duty officer, and he spoke to me, and I said, "Sir, I have to go on leave. I have to have a special leave to go to my grandmother's funeral." And he said, "I'm sorry, Chipman." He said, "But it's got to be immediate family, mother, father, brother, sister." I said, "Sir, let me tell you something. My grandmother raised me, and I love her, and not you, not the commanding officer, not this regiment, not the Canadian Army combined is going to stop me from going to that funeral. Now you have to make a choice, sir, whether to let me go or not." And he said, "Just a second." He got on the phone, called the Air Force, and arranged for a flight down for my grandmother's funeral. Another example of the success if you have the courage to stand up for what you believe in. And I'm hoping that any young people that are watching this will listen to it and understand how important it is. And if I can do anything, I will get the Charter of Rights and Freedoms taught in your school so you will know what your rights and freedoms are. Let me think of another example of fighting for rights. There are so many of them now, and as we go along, I'm just getting a little lost in my conversation here, so I'm going to take a little break, and I'll be right back, okay?
And even laughter seems so tainted that smiling's just as hard. I overlook the pain.
And we're back. And I go, I've been thinking all about my talks about the Army and the wonderful people that I've met. Bob Davies, my dearest friend, and my brother James. And the things that we did were sort of, it was amazing. And I encourage young men today to, if you want to, see, the thing is that you need help to get yourself together. And the Army will help you to get together so that you will know who you are and what you're capable of doing. Because I know that my parents, my grandmother and my mother both saw in me that I was born with pride, honor, integrity, and courage. And those are the four assets that you need to make it as a soldier. And because I had those assets, that's why they encouraged me to fight for my rights. And by doing that, they encouraged me to make a career for myself. And a wonderful career that I had before coming to Toronto. I have to tell you that before coming to Toronto, I lived a life that people only dream of. It was a dream life. It was so amazing, so wonderful, so beautiful. And then I came to Toronto, and it's been like going from heaven to hell, the transformation. And it's been driving me crazy here in Toronto. I'm lucky I still have my sanity enough that I can talk to you now. But the Army gave me so much. It gave me the courage to fight. It gave me the advantage to get ahead in life. And of course, when I got into broadcasting, which was really great, as I was talking about my friend Roger McLaughlin getting me, meeting me at this radio station, and he told me, he said, they're looking for an announcer from 3RCHA. And I said, well, he said, would you like the job? I said, sure, why not? Which, you know, you might think that somebody would say, oh, no, I don't know how to be a radio announcer. But it didn't matter. I didn't know how to be a radio announcer. I didn't care. I just wanted, Roger offered me the job, and I said, okay, I'm in. And when I went down to work at CAE in Virl, Germany, that's Canadian Army, Europe in Virl, Germany, the first day, Roger met me, and we went to the canteen, and we were sitting there having coffee. And it rolled around to 10:30, and he said, oops, we got to go, Tony. I said, why? He said, you're on the air in 2 hours. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah. He said, you're doing your first show at 12:30 to 2:30. I said, but I've never been on the air before. I don't know what to do. He said, for crying out loud, don't worry about it. He said, the best way to learn. And it was, because nobody told me what to do or how to do it, and I had to develop my own way of broadcasting, which ended up being a greatest asset that you could ever have, is to do things your own way. And when I get into radio in Canada, when I got back to Canada, and I got a job in radio in Canada, of course, at that point in time, this was back in the 60s, and there was some clown from California had come up with this new way of broadcasting. 10 seconds is all you're allowed to have between records. So I couldn't believe in that. I was a mouthpiece. They couldn't shut me up. So I just kept yapping away and proved that people wanted personality radio, not just music. And I suddenly became a guy they hired to be #1 in the market. And for example, in Sault Ste. Marie, CKCY hired me from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, where I was program director. And they had been in business for 20 years in the Sioux, and they had never rated #1. So they hired me, and the first ratings came out about 6 months later, and they were #1 in the market and remained #1 until I left. So, because I was different, I wasn't trained, it's why I say that schools can be just ineffective as they are effective, as they teach people to be a certain way instead of thinking of ways of doing things yourself. And that was what I had going for me because of my growing up and my background. And when I get into broadcasting, to be honest, and to be honest is the key to my success. In broadcasting, when I met people like Buck Owens, I loved Buck Owens. I loved his country music. I loved his show, Hee Haw. And when I met him, I was so excited. Buck Owens, I'm so excited to meet you. You are the greatest. I love your music. And he said, well, how do you like my latest record, Tony? And I said, well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, Buck. I said, because of all the music that you've done, I said, and I've played everything that you've ever written or recorded. I said, on a Sunday night, I was called in to do a classical music show, and lo and behold, I found a classical music group, a four-piece musical classical music group, playing Buck Owens songs. So that was what I featured on this classical show, was Buck Owens music done up classical style. And it went over beautifully. But this song that you've now recorded, I said, Buck, it doesn't sound like you. He said, Tony, come into my dressing room. We got to talk. And I spent an hour in the dressing room with Buck talking about his career and his life and my life and my career. And about a month later, I got a nice letter from Buck Owens inviting me to visit him at his ranch in California. All from being totally honest with him. The same with Henry Mancini, who was appearing at a concert in Winnipeg, and my wife and I were on our way down east to visit, and we stopped in Winnipeg to have a drink, and while we're having a drink, the RCA Victor rep came in and said, oh, you know, Henry Mancini's in town performing tonight. Would you like to go? Yeah, okay. And that's when I first met Henry Mancini and spent the most wonderful evening, one of the most wonderful evenings of my radio career with him. But those are just a couple of the things that have happened to me in my broadcasting career. I was program director in Moose Jaw, and the manager of the station, a great guy, but he called me in one day and he said, Tony, who the hell was that kid on the air Sunday morning? I said, oh, then I told him the name of the kid. He was just a kid from Saskatchewan, never had any training in broadcasting, and and he said, well, get rid of him, fire him. I said, why? He said, because he sounds like crap. And I said, you know what? You want him fired, you fire him, because to me, he is a guy that I can depend on, that I know if I called him at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, I need you to go into to work, he would do it without complaining. He is my most positive announcer, and I will not fire him. And lo and behold, he didn't get fired. And years after I left, I found out that the same manager of that radio station went on to manage a station in Edmonton. And who do you think his program director was? Exactly. The same young man that he had told me to fire that I refused. So that's how life is. You never know. And that's how my life has been. And I never knew what was going to happen next. But broadcasting opened my eyes to a whole new world, and it gave me a chance to do the one thing in life that brings me joy, and that was to reach out and help others. And the things I did, and I never thought of it when I was doing it that I was doing anything special, but now I realize from the looking through, I brought this in, that's a bag of evidence of some of the things I've done. And I thought if I run out of stuff to say to you, I can always dig into the bag and haul out some letters and things about the people that I've helped, the organizations that I've helped, and I take great pride in them. I went to a CKY reunion a couple of years ago in Winnipeg, and was surprised to find out that I'm practically a legend out there, because I spent more time in the community than I did on air, helping out in the community. For example, the bands, and I will dig out the names of the bands, I do have them, and let you know one of these days what they are. But at Christmas time, we used to go around to the hospitals, the prisons, and put on a show for them at Christmas time. And some of them were quite funny. We played the Mental Institute, and our guitar player was into the sauce a little bit and passed out on stage. It was just part of the show we put on that day. But it was strange because the audience just sat there like this. And no matter what we did, no clap or anything. So it was a pretty hard concert to do, but it was just one of many. We played the Portage in Portage La Prairie. We played the penitentiary out there, Stony Mountain Pen. And what I didn't know was that the guys that I went out with the band had a lot of fellas out there in jail in the prison that were friends of theirs. So they packed up their musical bags with booze, and were partying in the washroom while the show was going on. So that was quite a deal. But I did get to go out and do many presentations at the penitentiary after that. We went to the women's pen and put on a show there. It was so much fun. And then in the zoo, I was an animal lover. I must tell you about that. And when I lived in the zoo, I had 4 squirrel monkeys, a a woolly monkey, Siamese cat, Samoyed dog, and a cougar as pets. And when we got divorced, my wife got the woolly monkey, and I got we had 2 squirrel monkeys left then, and I got the 2 squirrel monkeys. And when I moved in with a friend, we couldn't have the monkeys there, so I handed them over to a friend of mine, John Haynes, who ran the Riverbend Zoo outside of Sudbury. And he said he'd take care of them. And about a month or 2 later, I get a phone call at the radio station, 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm on the air, and the news is on, and it's John Haynes from Riverbend Zoo. And he called to say, I got to talk to you, Tony. I said, just a second. The news will be over in a second. And when the news is over, I said, we have John Haynes on the phone from the Riverbend Zoo. John, how are you doing? And he started to cry. He said, Tony, the zoo burned down last night. I said, what? He said, the zoo burned down. I said, what about my babies, my Felix and Tico? He said, they were burned to death too. And the 2 of us were like kids, bawling our eyes out on the air and saying, and I said, John, I don't know what we can do, but I am telling you that we will find some way to help you to get that zoo back, because it's been so beautiful every year when you come down here and perform and bring your zoo to the Sault Ste. Marie. So the next thing, the phones lit up and people were volunteering to help. Is there anything we can do? And I had one young gentleman call me and say, Tony, I have a suggestion. I said, what's that? He said, why don't we have a 24-hour dance-a-rama and with a different band every hour? I said, that would be wonderful. How the hell can we do that? He said, very easy. He said, I've got the band, you get the location, and we'll have it. And I called the station mall, and they said, yeah, sure, you can use the station mall for it. And that was beautiful. I went to the police to get security for it. It was a, charitable thing. Oh, they said you'll have to hire 6 policemen at a time at $36 an hour for the 24-hour period. I said, I can't afford it. We don't even know if we're going to make any money. Are you crazy? Nope, that's the way it goes. I said, okay. So at the time, I was doing a broadcast from Diodati's health studio, and I went to Joe Diodati, and I said, Joe, I need some help. He said, what do you need, Tony? I said, I need some people to work security for me at my bandorama or my dance-a-rama. And I said, I was hoping I could get you to dress the guys up in T-shirts with your name on it, and then I can just tell people, if you're having a problem, check with our Diodati health security people. So we had a 24-hour dance-a-rama without a fight, without a broken window, without anything being stolen. It was the most peaceful, wonderful 24-hour party that I'd ever seen, because we didn't bring the police in to screw it all up like they do. They make more trouble than they save. Okay, so we didn't have the police, but they weren't going to leave us alone. Midnight of that first day, a policeman comes in and says, I'm closing you down. And I said, why? He said, because I found a young man sleeping in the doorway of a store down in the mall. I said, so? I said, it's a 24-hour dance-a-rama. If they want to crash out for an hour, why not? Leave them alone. No. He said, I'm closing it down. I said, oh, wait a second. And I picked up the phone, and I dialed the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie at midnight. And he answered the phone, and I told him the problem. And he said, Tony, don't worry. It'll be taken care of. 5 minutes later, I got a call from the police station, And the sergeant says, "Sorry about the interruption, Mr. Chipman, but we will not be closing you down, and we will have a police car stationed outside just in case you need our help." So again, standing up against the system, not being afraid to tell them where they are wrong. And that's what this whole program is going to be about. As we carry a boat, that sounds like a Canadian expression, a boat. That's what the Americans say. "Oh, what are you a boat about?" Okay? But that's the whole thing of this program is about, is to try to encourage Canadians to finally get off their ass and get in gear and get out there and stand up for your rights. Fight for your rights. They are the most valuable thing in your world, in your life, is your rights and freedoms. And if you don't fight for them, you're going to lose them all, and then you're going to regret it. And then you can look back at Russia, at the millions that were killed over there. You can look at Nazi Germany, at how the Jews were treated there, and you will see what's going to happen if you don't stand up and fight for your rights. And I'm going to take a quick break now because my voice is leaving me, and I will be right back. Okay? Take care. I love you.
Thank you.
And I am back. And this is I'm just going to wrap things up. I didn't realize how hard it was to talk for an hour, but it's tearing my throat apart. So I just wanted to say that I'm having so much fun, and I'm enjoying this so much, the chance to reach out to you. I have been trying on Facebook to get help for 30 years. I've been reaching out, trying to get somebody to help me to make changes in this world for the better. And finally, with the help of Leroy St. Germain and your Ward News, James Sears, Arthur Potts, these people came into my life when I was at my lowest, where I wanted to commit suicide, where I just didn't want to live in this country anymore, that I hated this country because of what happened to me. And you are going to find out what happened to me. And when you hear what happened to me in future programs, you will say, unbelievable, how could something so horrible happen in this country? You will not believe. But I will be back with lots more to tell you, and I hope that I get you so pissed off with my shit disturbing that you just have to get out there and fight. Okay? So till next time, you take care of yourselves. I love you all, and let's make the world a better place together.
I hope you're smiling, and I hope you're smiling, and everything is going your way. So, and I hope you're smiling, and your kind words went straight to my heart. Thank you for believing in me. Cup of tea you poured so much to me. And I hope you're smiling, and I hope you're smiling.